Do you also want to generate this kind of power during a rally? Today, we're focusing on the transition between forehand and backhand. First, let's have Xiaolu demonstrate the drill. Watch her and see how you compare. That's already very good. When I challenge my students to push their rally speed, very few can consistently land 15 out of 20 shots. So today, we'll focus specifically on the topic of rally speed. In a rally, the first thing you need to do is read your opponent's intention. We'll rally for a few shots. See if you can spot when she's about to change the ball's direction. It's difficult to tell at the exact moment of contact, isn't it? Just as she prepares to change direction, before the stroke is even executed, I can already tell she's going to change the placement. It works even at a faster pace. Let's try it faster. Backhand. Forehand. See how sensitive that anticipation is? Now try changing direction down the line with your forehand. Backhand. Forehand. You shouldn't be reading the shot after the ball has been struck. Many players need to develop a sharper sense of anticipation during rallies, serve returns, and third ball attacks. The goal is to heighten your sensitivity and anticipation. Most players react only after the ball has bounced, which is far too slow. Let's master this concept first, as it's key to improving your rallies. I'll show you how I read it. I'll play one shot down the line and one cross court. Observe carefully if there's a difference in my backswing. Okay, now let's hit a few backhands in a row, then suddenly switch to forehand. The same principle applies to the forehand. First, we'll alternate between down the line and cross court. Okay, now let's hit a few cross court shots and then switch to one down the line. Can you see the difference? First, to read the opponent's intention, you look at their body posture. Cross court. Down the line. Cross court. Down the line. I've noticed that when my students switch from a cross-court rally to a down-the-line shot, their body rotation stops. Observe the players around you. You'll see a definite difference in their stroke mechanics and timing when they hit cross-court versus down the line. The second cue is the backswing. Based on your observation, is the backswing for a down-the-line shot smaller or larger? Exactly, the backswing is smaller, right? If the backswing were the same size, the ball would go into the net or off the table. Therefore, the backswing must change. During a rally, when he intends to change direction, he won't use a full body rotation and arm follow-through. Instead, he will stay closer to the ball, reduce his body movement and shorten his backswing, and hit more directly forward. Developing this judgment requires practice. Now that you know the method, even if your anticipation isn't instant, reading it just a fraction of a second earlier makes a huge difference. Even a slightly earlier read buys you more time for your footwork and pre-positioning. The third method is to watch the forearm. Here's a very effective tip: most amateur players, when changing to a down-the-line shot, use a very direct, forward motion rather than a wide, looping arc like professionals. So, when you see their stroke path become very linear, the ball is most likely going to your middle or down the line, as they lack the wide swing for a sharp angle. A direct, forward swing path indicates a change of direction to a down-the-line shot. Conversely, if their arm path moves sideways, it's almost certainly a cross-court shot, as 90% of amateur players generate power in that direction. If their body rotation is incomplete and their arm doesn't fully follow through, the ball will go to your middle or down your line 80 to 90% of the time. Why is the transition between forehand and backhand smooth for some players but clunky for others? It's because of mistakes made in the recovery phase after the shot. After every stroke, your recovery motion must be a conscious, relaxed action. If your recovery is always tense and forceful, your movements will become progressively slower. If your rhythm is tense, relax, your transitions will be much faster. Do you know why your transitions feel a bit sluggish? It's because you are using force during your recovery. The rhythm should be a fluid 1, 2, 3, but yours is a tense 1, 2, 3 on every single shot. You're using excessive force on every backswing and every recovery. This results in a lack of rhythm and control over the ball. Consequently, the time taken for both the stroke and recovery becomes too long, making your movements look jerky and not fluid. So, how can we ensure our recovery is smoother? Look at my forehand loop, every recovery between shots is relaxed. Therefore, the interval between each shot in a rally is your time to relax and readjust. In your recovery, you need to achieve a sense of looseness in your relaxed backswing. The force should not be constant from the start of the swing to the end of the recovery. If it is, you're guaranteed to make an error after 2 or 3 shots. So you must learn to exert force on contact and relax on recovery. Only this principle will make your movements more fluid. The second reason for slow transitions is making a circular motion during recovery. Many players miss loops into the net because after making solid contact and creating the arc, they add an unnecessary downward pressing motion. This is a common flaw on both forehand and backhand. Same rule for the backhand loop against backspin. Stopping here already clears the net. Lifting higher just sends it long. The stroke becomes too large or deviates too far sideways. This is why your rallies are slow, your stroke has too many superfluous movements. For example, a proper backhand-forehand transition should be a crisp backhand, forehand, with a clear stop. Instead, many players create a large circular motion after both the backhand and forehand shots. This circular motion often comes from trying to generate power by swinging the entire arm or trying to lift the ball with your arm. To fix this, you must define a clear endpoint for your stroke. For example, on my backhand, my stroke always finishes here. I generate power mainly through explosiveness. You must eliminate these extra circular movements, as they disrupt the entire flow of your rally. Look, my forehand stroke stops here. There is no extra motion. This kind of unnecessary movement not only slows your recovery but also causes numerous problems when dealing with balls to different positions. Therefore, you must bring your stroke to a timely stop to generate power correctly and ensure a smooth transition. This is an excellent question. A player asked, how can you generate power during a rally? The reason I swing with my whole arm is because I'm trying to generate power. Let Xiaolu demonstrate the backhand punch. Her stroke isn't large, but the power is clearly there, isn't it? I understand you want to produce high-quality shots in a rally, whether against topspin or backspin, but that quality doesn't come from the arm. Now, demonstrate how you were using your arm to generate force yesterday. She mentioned she could never get a loud sound on impact. See? She's using maximum effort, but that is the limit of her power. Then I taught her one trick, and she immediately got the feeling. Let me demonstrate. Does that sound like a piece of wood snapping? Many players, even with such a large swing, can't generate any real force. Look at the forehand. Is there any body rotation? No. It's just the hand, right? So where is all this power coming from? Let me explain. Power in a rally doesn't come from the arm, it comes from the racket head. Look, I can swing my arm very fast like this, but no real power is generated. Right now, the feeling is like punching. Instead, your power generation should feel like a sharp slap to the face. When the ball comes, think of it as a quick slapping motion. In a rally, the force is primarily generated at the racket head. The same applies to a forehand loop. However, because it involves brushing the ball, the effect is less obvious. The principle is a snapping action. For both forehand and backhand, just practice slapping back and forth in the air to see how fast your swing can be. You must have this snapping sensation. The more you force it with your arm, the less power you will actually generate. The key point of force is at the racket head. To put it simply, let me show you in slow motion. The power is generated like this. The backhand is the same. I'm just keeping my wrist stable and generating the force with the racket head. That's how the power is transferred. Listen to that whooshing sound. Now, here is the common way people swing. Listen. There's no sound. This is what we call explosive power. Go back and try it. Use the racket head to drive into the ball, letting the racket head lead the arm to generate force. We often use our arm forcefully while the racket head remains passive. This makes the swing speed much slower, and power can't be generated. Watch closely. The power comes from the racket head, right? I'm just formalizing the motion, keeping it stable instead of wild. But the power still originates from the racket head. It's not arm power. The same principle applies to creating friction for spin. It's all in the small motion of the wrist. That's enough to generate a lot of spin. The arm is there to meet the ball forward and provide a stable base of power, not to create acceleration. There are too many players today who have good-looking strokes but can't generate power or contact the ball cleanly. Try to feel this, the force is being whipped out from your wrist. Not from the arm, but whipped from the wrist. I'm just making the motion more controlled and less floppy, but it's fundamentally a whipping action. It's a whipping feeling, not a forward push. Using your arm to make the stroke won't generate power. When you practice, just try fanning the air like this. I coached Xiao Lu this way yesterday. Now she can generate power on her forehand, too. Now let's talk about the feel for a loop. It's actually the same as a drive. I just add a bit of brushing friction on top of that forward impact, with a more closed racket angle. A loop is not pure friction, especially against a topspin ball. Whip the racket head through. Right. Just like that. The same applies to a backhand rip. That's it. I'm just adding friction to the base motion. It's the same for backspin, brush, then drive forward through the ball. That's it. Generate the force from your wrist, not from the elbow joint connecting the upper and lower arm. The elbow joint can be used to generate absolute strength, but for explosive power, that slapping sensation, it comes from the wrist. When I combine that with power from my larger joints, the force is fully unleashed. If you only use your upper arm while your wrist is locked, the power will be very rigid and dead. Watch, my arm isn't moving, only my wrist. Can you hear that sound? It still has explosive power. Now, imagine if I add my arm to that. The power becomes even greater. The area below the wrist is for explosive power. The upper arm, forearm, and elbow are for absolute strength. That's where you use as much raw strength as you have. Combine these two elements with your body rotation, and generating power won't be so difficult.